welcome to another episode of the Market Pulse presented by SmartTouch. I'm your host, Aaron Fichera, and today I have an incredible guest with us, our very own Eric Shattuck. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Aaron.
For those that don't know Eric is our SEO guru or Sherpa that leads us through the rapid world. Eric, you've won the 2024 Max Awards for Associate of the Year. You've spoken at IBS on our topic today around AI, multiple builder associations speaking on this engagement, and then also a champion fencer and soon to be father. So I do want to give you a shout out on that. But, you have an extensive past. So before we talk about, in this show, for those that are listening, there's been a lot of talk around AI and then its impact on SEO and Google search. So that's going to be the crux of today's topic. But Eric, to give our audience a little background of yourself, how'd you get into this industry?
Well, I kind of started at the bottom with content writing, actually. That's what I went to school for. So I started out writing all of these articles that now, that's the big fear, is AI replacing content writers, is writing obsolete. So I started there, kind of transitioned into SEO organically, where I was working for clients and they were saying, hey, you're already writing this content. Do you do the SEO side as well? Do you optimize for this? And at the time I didn't, but I realized that was a really good entry point into that field as well. So I started kind of teaching myself, learning what I could, doing courses through Google, and just kind of get my mind around how that worked. Started doing that as a freelancer for a while, working typically one-on-one with clients. And then from there transitioned into the agency side with SmartTouch. So it's been a journey all the way from the writing to now the managing.
Yeah. No, it's, anything when it comes to SEO that you find fascinating. I mean, anything that was just more than taking it to the next step from the article and then optimizing it, or are there other aspects that kind of perk your interest?
I think for me, it's just that it's constantly changing, and there's almost like a game aspect to it, a little bit of cat and mouse, where Google is constantly adjusting its algorithms and you're trying to play catch up. It's always kind of a black box in terms of what levers are getting pulled, what's getting weighed how in terms of optimization. And so there's always that little puzzle element to it that kind of keeps me engaged with it and just kind of, I don't know, I like that part of it. I like going back and trying to figure out, okay, what's working right now, what's not, how are these strategies changing? It never gets boring, I'll say that.
Well, good. I mean, to that point, I mean, the only constant thing is change, and we are in the monumental change, being in an AI revolution. So, just like the internet changed, or how we search and how we consume information, AI is going to change that. So, we can't speak about AI without talking about ChatGPT.
Absolutely.
Eric, for yourself, is ChatGPT a game changer?
It is in a lot of ways, not in some of the ways people think, which is kind of interesting. A lot of times when I talk to people about what I do, I talk to people about, creating content for websites and SEO optimization. Kind of the general idea about it is just, you just plug stuff into ChatGPT, it spits it out, you copy and paste it on your website, you're good to go. Why am I paying for writers? Why am I paying for SEO specialists? What's the point? And that's not quite the case. For me, it's a game changer in terms of just being kind of a force multiplier, that it's able to take things that would normally take me hours, that would normally be just a real pain to kind of take, and it's able to condense that into something that's a lot more manageable. Just lets me use my time a lot more wisely. So it's a productivity tool first and foremost for me, and it's very good at that. You do have to know what to look out for. You have to understand its pitfalls and limitations. It's not a magic bullet. It's not a reason to go out and, fire your writers and all of your other experts. But if you know how to wield it, there's a lot of stuff you can do with that to increase your productivity by several orders of magnitude.
I mean, any top examples, from your standpoint as SEO or marketer that you feel like, hey, this has saved me hours of time?
For me, probably the biggest one is semantic mapping. And that's a thing where sometimes when we'll even talk to clients about, starting an SEO project, they're still kind of stuck back in the the old days where everybody's used to, you write ghost pages, you stuff invisible keywords all over. You have this primary keyword you're trying to rank for, and you just put it in your page as many times as you possibly can. And that's not really how it's worked for quite a while now. Even before AI, Google was already kind of implementing more contextual search based functions. And now with AI, they've really kind of ramped that up. We see that with what Google is rolling out with their SGE, their search generative experience. And so, really, what I try to explain to people when I'm talking about SEO in the AI age is even before ChatGPT, Google was kind of breaking things down into what are called entities. And these could be as simple as a keyword phrase, it could be a name, it could be any information that's stored in their information graph. But they're using this information and they're forming relationships with it behind the scenes. You're not seeing it when you're doing a search, but all of these things are going on behind the curtain, so to speak, that are kind of linking these ideas together, these entities together, so that when you search for one thing, you'll notice like related searches, people also searched for, you'll get recommendations that seem to be uncannily accurate. They're usually pretty good at figuring out what you're trying to find or what you might want to search for next. And that's because of this system of entity based search that Google is using. And so when we talk about semantic mapping, it's basically understanding the relationships between those entities. And that's something that you used to have to do manually. You had to go through, you had to find your keywords, you had to search for them manually, find these also searched for terms, find what Google thought was related to that, and kind of keep branching, keep pruning that down from there. Now
Uh,
with AI, you can do that almost instantly.
So it's kind of that semantic is similar to what like Google does, or freehand, where it's like maybe I put an actor's name in, and it kind of gives me some of that relative information.
Absolutely, yeah. It's no longer a case where it's only going to serve you results based on the exact keyword that you searched for, which a few decades ago, right as Google was kind of rolling out, you were seeing that kind of be that game plan there, where you would search for something, and if those words were included in that query, it would serve you up results based on those specific keyword phrases. And the way to rank higher for those was to just include them as many times as you could on your page. Now it's very context based. So what I like to tell people is it's Google is slowly moving forward into what basically I would describe what they're looking for is what does a human being talk like? What are they searching for organically? How do they communicate? You're not writing for a robot, which seems even stranger in the age of AI, that we are in some sense literally writing for a robot right now. But it's all still based on this organic system of communication. It wants your content to feel human. It wants it to address that search intent. It wants it to answer the question somebody's asking, but it wants it done in a human way. And so it's very good. Google's algorithms are very good at pulling that organic context and figuring out, even if you didn't include all of these words, this is what we think you were looking for, or we think you might be interested in this as well. And it's very accurate.
Well, and kind of before we go into that larger topic of search and getting to that coveted position zero spot, content and using AI for content, whether it be images or articles or just in general, organic and so forth. Um, we talked about the benefits, but there's got to be pitfalls. I mean, do you see any examples or warnings that you would give builders, developers around using AI or just going no holds bar?
My biggest piece of advice, and this is why I say you definitely don't want to rush to go, fire all your experts, is that you absolutely need a subject matter expert behind the wheel of this stuff to make sure that things aren't slipping through. We've talked about this on our panels, but AI still, it's getting better by the day, but it still has a tendency to hallucinate. And what that's basically meaning is it's filling that void in information that it doesn't have with its best guess. And just like a person, it doesn't like to tell you, I don't know, or I don't have an answer for that. So it'll kind of cobble together things sometimes that look correct at a glance. And if you're not a subject matter expert, it might fool you. It looks legitimate, but if you dig a little bit deeper, you find out that that information is not correct. And that's the biggest pitfall right now is being able to tell the difference. There's still kind of guardrails you need to have for this AI content. You need to make sure that you're not just pumping stuff out there without any oversight because you will kind of violate your users' trust. You will put out information that's false. And depending on what industry you're in, something like real estate, you can make a very expensive mistake doing that. There's a few industries like that. Healthcare, obviously, that's a bigger concern there where you're dealing with people's health. Some things not as big of a deal, but real estate where you're talking potential $1 million homes plus, you can't really afford to make those mistakes. So you have to make sure that the information you're putting out there, whether you're using AI assistance or not, is accurate.
Well, I also kind of feel this is more less of any backing, but there seems to be a bit of an AI fatigue. You know, these images and things that we've seen maybe 3, 4 years ago were like, oh, like that's the coolest thing. Everyone gather around, look at it. But now it's kind of like, oh, it's an AI. You know, the Studio Ghibli or the claymations. Everyone's kind of jumping on the latest fad, and it kind of gets exciting and then dissipates. So there's really, it doesn't really seem like if Google or the consumer is valuing quote authentic content, just producing 100% AI images doesn't seem to be any beneficial at this stage or in its current capacity.
Right. And that's when we're talking about one question I get a lot is, is Google penalizing this content? Uh, and by their own policy admissions, they're not penalizing content right now, except for things that they consider basically low value or no value content. And that kind of goes back to that idea of don't just churn stuff out just because you can. Yeah, you can tell ChatGPT to write you a 2,000 word article on anything you want, and it'll do it. Uh, but if the content isn't up to par, if it's not quality, if it's not addressing an actual concern your user is looking for, Google understands that. Their algorithms, their detection systems are not perfect. They're not out here able to detect every single bit of AI created content, nor are they even worried about that right now. But they are looking for kind of that low hanging fruit. And they had just recently kind of a big mass purge with manual disindexation of sites that were basically doing that, just kind of spamming tons of low quality content, trying to rank for
And they
basically,
just basically cut these
yeah,
sites off and
manual action and yeah, deprioritize them in the rankings. You're not going to find them anymore. And so that's kind of that low hanging fruit that they're looking to trim is, are you providing any actual value with this content? And a lot of people are just, they're so enamored with the idea that they can create basically infinite content that stopped being a bottleneck, that they're not really thinking about, the user first. And that's kind of backwards thinking. You really have to be thinking from the perspective of your user, your buyer, whatever your audience may be. You need to be thinking from their perspective first.
well, I mean, from the user experience and kind of shifting gears around search, we now have another black box we have to deal with. Google doesn't give us anything around those entities, and now we're dealing with ChatGPT, which is now becoming more and more as a search competitor. Google makes up what 90% plus of the search.
Yeah. So that's been another interesting topic is seeing like, is ChatGPT kind of chipping away at Google, kind of taking the throne? Right now, the best data we have was from the very beginning of 2024, where we were looking at kind of market share. And as
And
best
Google
as the
kind of
numbers
fumbled a little bit at the end.
it was about a 2%, 1.52% drop in market share for Google, kind of right around that big first push for ChatGPT. I mean, Google is still king of the pile. They have been since August of 2015 when they broke that 90% market share barrier. They've remained in that 90 to 92% range consistently since then. So ChatGPT is not dethroning Google yet. But we are definitely seeing some shifts in behavior where people are kind of going to ChatGPT as a search engine because it's able to
But
synthesize all of that information.
but at the very least, it's like you said, the king of the pile. But it's kind of poked that bear a bit because it's caused Google to change, and where they're now incorporating that kind of co-pilot at the top, which is that position zero. And I'll let you kind of be the expert here, but why is that position zero so coveted, and why is that now changed?
Yeah. So if you're familiar with older SEO practices, basically when you would search for something on Google, kind of the first thing you would see would be their featured snippet, which was considered position zero up until very recently. And that was just basically Google saying, we think you're the best answer to this query. We want to highlight that for users. We think you provided the information in the most succinct way. And this kind of goes back to Google has had kind of this long-standing goal of what they call zero-click search. Essentially, they want to be able to answer a user's question without them having to go to another website afterwards. They don't even necessarily want a user clicking a link. They want to be able for somebody to search something on Google, have the answer, and that's all they need. So
Hmm.
featured snippets were kind of their first step towards that. And now we have, with their search generative experience, the AI overviews, which have replaced those featured snippets. They perform a pretty similar function. They're basically pulling that information with AI, and they're kind of giving you that answer. Sometimes they'll give you a couple of different answers, but they're trying to provide that same succinct answer, and they're going to link to different sites that they're pulling that information from. So whatever source that AI pulled from, you're going to have citations there. Sometimes you'll have an image or even a short video in the AI overview, but more often than not, it's just going to be a pretty simple answer and then a link to where that came from. So the benefit of being in that AI overview is pretty clear. It's a link directly to your website. It's establishing your authority. And when they say position zero, that's because it's appearing over top of everything else. All
Yeah.
other organic
Even
search,
paid.
yeah, even paid, even sponsored content, you're showing up first above people that are paying for their content to be featured there and above all other organic content. So it's absolutely the crown jewel if you can get that, if you can get your site ranking in that AI overview for something that has a lot of search volume, it's a huge boon to your traffic and to your conversion rate.
I mean, kind of in that same thought process of future thinking and looking ahead. I mean, do you see AI continuing to reshape, the SEO field? Anything that's kind of perking up your interest you would want to share, or well, is this, some maybe infant stages, but something to maybe pay attention to?
Yeah, there's still a ton of room for growth. It's going to impact this industry in ways that I don't even think we are starting to kind of peel the layers back on yet. But just in terms of what's happening now in this kind of early adopter phase that we're still in, uh, we are seeing like SEO professionals trying to kind of figure this out. Because, like you said, this is another black box. We know Google has over 800 variables that go into play for determining ranking factors. ChatGPT, we don't have any clear idea of what they're doing behind those different weights and how these different search engines are using that and not using it. There was
I mean,
actually,
but you would assume that as they're making their way to become a for-profit company, that's going to become more open, because you just again assume they have to make a profit.
that's definitely the assumption. And there's been some research kind of trying to figure this out. So there was a study early last year that was spearheaded by Princeton and a few other universities, and they tried to recreate an LLM, kind of getting as close to ChatGPT as they could without understanding what was going on under the hood at the time. And they were trying to feed content in there. Then they would go through, make certain optimizations, refeed it through, and try to figure out, okay, what does AI seem to be prioritizing? What is it? What is this LLM looking for in this content that makes it say this is an authoritative piece or this is a piece we want to highlight? And what they found with that preliminary research, the not surprising part, they found keyword stuffing had absolutely no impact. Not surprised by that at all. Google hasn't cared about that for years either. But what they did find was, again, going back to, and this is, I always tell people a lot of this is just sticking to SEO fundamentals, SEO best practices. So a lot of what they found is that the AI likes getting a sense of authority from your piece. And that comes in a few ways. The three biggest variables in terms of weighting were having quotations from somebody that was considered an expert. So again, that goes back to that idea of an entity, that it can identify that entity and know these are their credentials. It can pull that from the information graph. This person knows what they're talking about. This isn't just a random bystander. They're educated in this field. They're worth listening to. And if you have a quotation by them, that perks that AI's ears up a little bit and says, this is somebody worth looking at. This is something worth listening to. Another factor that it was looking at was just citations in general, both internal and external. So, and again, this is already SEO best practice. It wants to see that you are linking to things on your own website. It wants to see that you're linking to things outside of your own website, that you're not afraid to say, hey, I got this information from another source. Here it is, so you can look at it. That kind of builds that idea of trustworthiness, that you're not hiding that information. And that third thing that it like to see, which is again related to all of this, is statistics. Not really surprising that AI would like to see hard numbers, hard data. And all of these things kind of combined give you an idea of how it's prioritizing things. So it really wants that raw data whenever possible. It wants that sense of authority. It wants that sense of trustworthiness. It wants proof that you know what you're talking about, that you can back it up with sources.
There's a lot to tackle in this field, and it's just going to get more. Um,
Absolutely.
so, I mean, if you're kind of similar to a lot of the audience, or the clients we have the pleasure of serving, where do they start with? If you're just saying, "Hey, I want to dip my toe into AI and figure out how to get some gains," where would you recommend?
I mean, ChatGPT is the obvious starting point for me. I always just tell people, just start playing around with it. Pay the $20 a month for the premium version. Start just playing around with it, uh, giving it different prompts, try feeding it information, things you've already written. Just kind of see what you can get it to do. And a few prompts I like to use for that are like, try to match my brand voice on this piece of content, or take these competitors' articles and tell me what they're doing that I'm not in this article that I wrote. What am I missing? It's really good at writing outlines, things like that. But just kind of getting your feet in the water and testing out its capabilities goes a long ways towards understanding kind of how these things work and how we're going to be using them in the future.
Eric, I know as we're kind of coming here and uh, towards the end of our program and just giving a high level overview of the current state of AI, its impact, and it's not going to go anywhere. And we're only going to be talking more and more about these entities and attributes that we then have to build SEO strategies around, especially, cooperations with Microsoft, Bing, Google, ChatGPT. Some people are using Claude. What does that mean for search and how people are looking to get found? Um,
It definitely means that you have to start incorporating AI into your SEO strategy. If you're not doing that already, if you're not thinking about that as a business, you're already a little bit behind. The good news, as we said earlier, it's already kind of an early adopter phase. It's not too late to kind of get in on the ground floor of this and really start incorporating this into your workflow. But just keeping these things in mind, it's a big time for people to even brush up on SEO fundamentals if they're still stuck in the old days of keyword stuffing. Like, this is a great time to get in and realize just how much everything has changed in the past 10 years alone. And we're on the cusp of that changing even further. The landscape is going to be almost unrecognizable in a few years, I think. But the faster you get into this, the faster you start getting kind of your head
so
around.
it kind of sounds like, yes, it's daunting, but don't worry because we're all in it together.
Yeah, there's a lot of, we're all kind of learning this as we go. There's a few people that are really immersed in this and kind of pioneering it. And then you've got the early adopters that are kind of right there alongside them, that are using these tools, that are testing them out, that are figuring out how they work and how to incorporate them. And then the people that aren't doing that are going to be left behind. So it's really just a matter of get a foot in the door, start figuring it out today.
Well, I always like to, we all come from different backgrounds and bring us here, and kind of getting foot in the door and playing off of that. Eric, when it comes to young professionals or those that are thinking about making that jump into the real estate industry or home building developer world, similar to yourself, what advice would you give?
Kind of similar advice to people that are looking to get into AI is just, you got to start somewhere. You got to just figure out the tools that you need to use. You need to get your head around it. Um, I would recommend professionally going into agency work is really rewarding because you kind of get a little bit of everything. It can be hectic, it can be very chaotic, it can feel overwhelming sometimes, but you're going to learn everything and you're going to hit the ground running.
No
Uh,
2 days are the same.
and no, yeah, and it's a great environment for just picking up those skills and just kind of learning what you need to know to succeed in this profession.
So, well, Eric, you're a wealth of knowledge, so I appreciate you taking some time out of today of your busy schedule, and thank you, sir.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And for those that are listening, thank you for taking some time, and we'll catch you here next time on the Market Pulse. Have a great day.